The text message that ruined Sienna Gallo's life arrived at 11:42 p.m. on a Tuesday. Sienna was sitting in the quietest corner of the Boston University Library, the smell of old paper and coffee surrounding her. She was 21, a scholarship student focused entirely on her degree in art restoration. She spent her days fixing broken things, carefully gluing centuries-old porcelain back together. She had no idea that across the city, her own life was being shattered beyond repair. The message was from her father, Marcus. "Come to the Valenti Gallery on Newbury Street. Now. Don't ask questions. Just hurry." Sienna stared at the screen. Her father, a man who chased get-rich-quick schemes like a dog chasing cars, had never set foot in an art gallery in his life. But something about the typo in the text, the desperation in it, made her stomach turn. She packed her bag, pulled on her heavy winter coat, and walked out into the biting Boston wind. The Valenti Gallery was a fortress of glass and black steel nestled among the high-end boutiques. At midnight, the street was empty, snow swirling under the streetlights. Sienna pushed open the heavy glass door, expecting to find her father drunk or arguing with a security guard. Instead, she found silence. The gallery was dimly lit, the walls lined with paintings that cost more than her entire tuition. In the center of the room, her father was on his knees. Sienna froze. Marcus Gallo was weeping, his hands clasped together, begging the empty air. Standing above him, looking at a painting of a storm-tossed ship, was a man who looked like he owned the darkness itself. Don Lorenzo Valenti was 64 years old, but he didn't look elderly. He looked timeless, like a statue carved from granite. He wore a charcoal suit that fit his broad shoulders perfectly. His silver hair swept back from a face defined by hard angles and cold eyes. He held a glass of whiskey in one hand, not even looking at the sobbing man on the floor. "Dad?" Sienna whispered, her voice echoing in the large space. Lorenzo turned slowly. His eyes were the color of slate, unreadable and terrifyingly intelligent. He didn't look at Sienna with lust or hunger. He looked at her with the cold calculation of an investor examining a potential asset. "Sienna," Lorenzo said. His voice was deep, a baritone that vibrated in her chest. "Your father told me you were punctual. I appreciate that." Sienna rushed to her father, grabbing his arm. "Get up. What is happening? Who is this?" Marcus wouldn't look at her. He was shaking, smelling of sweat and fear. "I'm sorry, Sienna. I tried to win it back. I swear I tried." "Win what back?" Sienna demanded. "The $4 million he stole from my shipping containers," Lorenzo answered calmly. He took a sip of his whiskey. "Your father has a gambling problem, Miss Gallo, and tonight, his luck finally ran out." Sienna felt the blood drain from her face. $4 million. It was an impossible number. We can set up a payment plan," she stammered, stepping between the giant man and her cowering father. "I work. I'll quit school. Lorenzo laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "You make $12 an hour at the library, Sienna. You would need 3 lifetimes to pay the interest alone." He set the glass down on a pedestal. The sound of crystal hitting marble rang out like a gunshot. "I don't want your money," Lorenzo said, taking a step toward her. The air in the room seemed to get heavier. "I have enough money to burn this city to the ground and rebuild it in gold. I want something else." "What?" Sienna asked, her breath trembling. "I want a legacy," Lorenzo said. "And you are going to give it to me." Before we continue to the dark deal that seals Sienna's fate, if you enjoy stories where innocent girls tame dangerous men, please hit that subscribe button. It helps me create more stories like this for you. The silence in the gallery stretched until it felt like a physical weight. Sienna looked from her weeping father to the powerful man standing before her. "I don't understand," she whispered. "It is simple," Lorenzo said, walking around her slowly, inspecting her. "I am the head of the Valenti Syndicate. I have held power in this city for 40 years, but I have no heir. My first wife died barren. My nephews are incompetent fools who would ruin my empire in a week. He stopped directly in front of her. He was over 6 feet tall, towering over her. I need a son, someone I can mold, someone to carry the name. Sienna felt bile rise in her throat. You want me to have a baby for you? Like a surrogate? No, Lorenzo corrected sharply. I do not want a bastard child born in a clinic. I want a legitimate heir. I want a wife, a woman young enough to carry a healthy child, intelligent enough to raise him, and desperate enough to agree to my terms. He gestured to her father. Marcus here offered you up like a poker chip the moment he realized I was going to kill him. Sienna spun around to look at her father. Dad? Tell me he's lying. Marcus finally looked up, his eyes red-rimmed and pathetic. Sienna, please. It's the only way. He'll kill me. He'll kill us both. He's a billionaire, honey. You'll be set for life. You'll live like a queen. You sold me? Sienna's voice cracked. To save your own skin? I saved your life. Marcus screamed, his voice shrill. You think you can walk away from a $4 million debt? You marry him, and the debt is gone. Zero. A clean slate. Sienna looked back at Lorenzo. The older man was watching the family drama with zero emotion, checking his expensive watch. The offer expires in 2 minutes, Lorenzo said. Either you agree to become Mrs. Lorenzo Valenti, live in my home, and bear my children, or your father leaves this building in a body bag, and you, my dear, will be sold to my associates in Russia to work off the debt in ways I promise you will not enjoy. It wasn't a choice. It was an execution with a loophole. Sienna looked at her hands. They were stained with charcoal from her art class. Yesterday, her biggest worry was a history exam. Today, she was negotiating the sale of her body. She looked at Lorenzo. He was old enough to be her grandfather, yet he radiated a dangerous vitality that made him seem more lethal than any young man she knew. He was a monster, clearly, but he was a monster offering a contract. If I do this, Sienna said, her voice shaking but clear, if I marry you, my father walks free, the debt is gone, instantly, Lorenzo promised. And I want one more thing, Sienna added. Lorenzo raised an eyebrow. You are in no position to bargain, little bird. I want him gone, Sienna said, pointing at her father without looking at him. I never want to see him again. He doesn't get to visit. He doesn't get a penny of your money. He disappears, Marcus gasped. Sienna. Lorenzo smiled then. It was a small, terrifying shift of his lips. Done. I admire a woman who knows when to cut off a rotting limb. He extended a large, scarred hand toward her. Do we have a deal, Sienna? Sienna hesitated for a heartbeat. She thought about running. She thought about screaming. But she knew the doors were locked. And she knew the man in front of her owned the police. She reached out and took his hand. His grip was warm, dry, and strong enough to crush bone. Deal, she whispered. Good, Lorenzo said, not letting go. The car is waiting. We are going to City Hall. The ceremony was a blur of gray walls and legal paperwork. It was 2 a.m. Lorenzo had woken up a judge, a man who looked terrified of him, to perform the marriage in a private chamber. There were no flowers, no white dress. Sienna was still wearing her winter coat and boots. She signed the marriage license with a trembling hand. Sienna Valenti. Lorenzo signed with a flourish, his hand steady. He didn't kiss her when the judge pronounced them man and wife. He simply nodded, turned, and walked out, expecting her to follow. They rode in the back of a black armored SUV through the empty streets of Boston. The silence in the car was suffocating. Sienna pressed herself against the door, trying to be as small as possible. She was married. She was property. The car pulled up to the Valenti Tower, a massive skyscraper that overlooked the harbor. Lorenzo led her into a private elevator that shot up 50 floors in seconds. The penthouse was breathtaking. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the entire glittering city. The floors were black marble, the furniture white leather, It was cold, sterile, and unmistakably masculine. "This is your home now," Lorenzo said, taking off his suit jacket and draping it over a chair. Sienna stood by the door, clutching her backpack. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. This was it, the part she had been dreading since the gallery. He had bought a wife for breeding. He had been clear about that. Lorenzo loosened his tie and poured himself another drink from a crystal decanter. He turned to face her, noticing her terror. "You are shaking," he observed. Sienna swallowed hard. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do." Lorenzo took a step toward her. Sienna flinched, stepping back until her back hit the cold glass of the window. There was nowhere to run. She was 50 floors up, locked in a cage with a predator. She closed her eyes, waiting for his hands, waiting for him to drag her to the bedroom and take what he had paid for. She told herself to dissociate, to just let it happen so she could survive. "Open your eyes, Sienna," Lorenzo commanded. She opened them. He was standing 3 feet away, watching her with that intense, analytical gaze. "You think I am going to force you," he said. It wasn't a question. "You bought me," Sienna whispered. "You said you wanted an heir." "I did," Lorenzo agreed. "And I will have one. But I am not a rapist. I am a businessman, and I am a man of patience." He turned his back on her, walking toward the hallway. "The master suite is down the hall. It has a lock. You will sleep there tonight." Sienna blinked, confused. And you?" "I will sleep in the guest quarters," Lorenzo said without looking back. "I do not share a bed with strangers. And frankly, Sienna, you are a child to me right now. A frightened, trembling child. That does not interest me." He paused at the doorway, his voice dropping an octave. "You are my wife. You wear my ring. That is enough for tonight. But do not mistake my patience for weakness. Eventually, you will come to my bed willingly. I never take what isn't offered." He walked out, leaving her alone in the massive living room. Sienna stared at the empty hallway. She was safe. For tonight. But as she looked at the heavy diamond ring weighing down her hand, she realized the terrifying truth. Lorenzo Valenti didn't just want her body. He wanted her submission. He planned to wait until she gave it to him. And that kind of psychological game was infinitely more dangerous than violence. Sienna walked to the master bedroom, locked the door, and pushed a heavy dresser in front of it. But she knew that if the wolf wanted in, no furniture would stop him. She curled up on the massive bed, fully clothed, and waited for the sun to rise on her new life as a prisoner. Sienna didn't see Lorenzo for 3 days. She lived like a ghost in the penthouse. The place was a museum of modern luxury, filled with silence and the low hum of the HVAC system. A housekeeper named Maria, a stoic Portuguese woman who spoke little English, brought her meals on trays. The food was exquisite: lobster risotto, fresh pastries, imported fruit. But every time Sienna tried the front door, the digital lock flashed red. Access denied. She was a bird in a gilded cage, kept fed and watered, waiting for her owner to return. On the 4th evening, the elevator chimed. Sienna was sitting on the white leather sofa, sketching on a notepad she'd found in the office. Her heart jumped into her throat as heavy footsteps echoed on the marble. Lorenzo walked in, bringing the cold winter air with him. He looked tired, lines of exhaustion etched around his eyes, but he still moved with that predatory grace. He stopped when he saw her. "You are still wearing the clothes you arrived in," he noted, his voice flat. Sienna looked down at her jeans and sweater. She had washed them in the sink, refusing to touch the wardrobe of designer clothes Maria had unpacked for her. "I'm not your doll," Sienna said, her voice trembling slightly. "I don't wear costumes." Lorenzo walked to the bar and poured a glass of water. "They are not costumes. They are clothes befitting my wife. Wearing dirty denim is an insult to me, and more importantly, an insult to yourself." He turned, leaning against the counter. "You have not eaten the dinner Maria prepared." "I'm not hungry." "You are on a hunger strike," Lorenzo corrected. "A foolish tactic. Starving yourself will not make the door open. It will only make you weak. Sienna stood up, anger finally overriding her fear. What do you want from me, Lorenzo? You bought me. You locked me in here. But you ignore me. Are you just waiting for me to break? Lorenzo set the glass down. The room went very quiet. I am waiting for you to stop acting like a victim, he said calmly. I told you, Sienna. I need a partner. A queen. Not a frightened girl who hides in the corner. He walked over to a side table and picked up a black credit card. He tossed it onto the coffee table in front of her. There is no limit on that card. Tomorrow, my driver will take you shopping. Buy what you want. Books, art supplies, clothes. You are free to move about the city, as long as my security detail is with you. Sienna stared at the card. You're letting me leave the apartment? I am letting you live, Lorenzo said. But do not mistake this for freedom. If you try to run, my men will find you before you reach the airport. If you try to contact the police, they will call me. You are mine, Sienna. The sooner you accept that, the sooner you can start enjoying the privileges that come with it. He walked past her toward his office, pausing just beside her ear. Dinner is at 8 tomorrow. Wear something beautiful. I'm tired of eating alone. Sienna watched him close the office door. She looked at the black card, then at her reflection in the dark window. She wasn't free, but the leash had just gotten longer, and for the first time, she wondered what would happen if she stopped pulling against it and started learning how to hold it. If you were in Sienna's shoes, would you use the money or refuse it out of pride? Let me know in the comments. The shopping trip was a blur of luxury boutiques on Newbury Street, with two massive bodyguards shadowing Sienna's every move. She didn't buy clothes. She bought a sketchbook, charcoal pencils, and a small, razor-sharp paring knife from a high-end culinary store. She hid the knife in the spine of her sketchbook. That night, after a silent dinner where Lorenzo watched her with unnerving intensity, Sienna retreated to the master bedroom. She changed into one of the silk nightgowns Maria had left out of compromise, she told herself, and slid the knife under her pillow. At 2 a.m., the door handle turned. Sienna shot up in bed, her hand gripping the handle of the knife beneath the pillow. Lorenzo entered. He wasn't wearing his suit. He was in dark pajama bottoms and a t-shirt that revealed arms corded with muscle and covered in faded scars. He didn't look like a billionaire. He looked like a brawler. Maria tells me you asked for a lock on this door, Lorenzo said, stopping at the foot of the bed. I like my privacy. Sienna lied, her heart hammering against her ribs. There are no secrets in my house, Lorenzo said. He moved closer. And no weapons. Sienna froze. Give it to me, Sienna. I don't know what you're talking about. Lorenzo moved faster than a man his age should be able to. In a blur of motion, he pinned her wrist to the mattress gently but firmly and reached under the pillow with his other hand. He pulled out the paring knife. Sienna squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for the blow, waiting for the anger. Pathetic, Lorenzo muttered. Sienna opened her eyes. He wasn't looking at her with anger. He was looking at the knife with disdain. This is a fruit knife, Sienna. The blade is flimsy. If you had tried to stab me with this, it would have snapped on a rib, and then I would have been angry. He released her wrist and tossed the knife into the trash can across the room. You have fire, Lorenzo said, a strange light in his eyes. You want to protect yourself. Good. A Valenti wife should be dangerous. He pulled a business card from his pocket and dropped it on the bed. His name is Elias. He is former Mossad. He will be here at 6 a.m. tomorrow. If you want to kill a man, Sienna, learn to do it properly. Don't embarrass me with kitchen utensils. He turned and walked to the door. Sleep well, cara mia. You have a long day tomorrow. Sienna stared at the card. Elias Cohen, private security. Lorenzo had disarmed her, insulted her weapon, and then hired her an assassin as a tutor. Sienna touched her wrist where his hand had been. He hadn't hurt her. He had challenged her, and for the first time since the gallery, Sienna didn't feel like prey. She felt like a student. 3 weeks of training with Elias had transformed Sienna. Her body was sore, bruised, and stronger than it had ever been. Elias was a brutal teacher, teaching her how to use her small size as a weapon, how to gouge eyes, and how to break a trachea. She stopped walking with her head down. She started walking like she owned the space around her. "Tonight is the test," Lorenzo announced over breakfast. "A test?" Sienna asked, sipping her espresso. She no longer flinched when he spoke. "The Boston Symphony Gala. The entire city will be there. Politicians, judges, and my enemies." Lorenzo looked at her, his gaze sweeping over her form. "They know I have married. They think I am senile. They think I bought a young trophy who will drain my accounts and embarrass me. Tonight, we prove them wrong." Sienna wore a gown of midnight blue velvet that hugged every curve, with a slit up the thigh that revealed just enough leg to be dangerous. She wore the diamonds Lorenzo gave her, cold, heavy, and brilliant. When she walked into the living room, Lorenzo actually stopped pouring his drink. He stared at her for a long moment, silence stretching between them. "You look..." He cleared his throat, his composure slipping for a fraction of a second. "Adequate," Sienna smirked. "Try not to trip over your cane, old man." Lorenzo's eyes flashed with amusement. "Careful, Sienna, or I'll keep you home and demonstrate exactly how much vitality I have left." The threat sent a shiver down her spine that wasn't entirely fear. The symphony hall was dripping with gold and hypocrisy. Sienna walked on Lorenzo's arm, chin high, feeling the eyes of Boston's elite burning into her. She heard the whispers: "Gold digger, child bride, poor girl." During the intermission, a man approached them. He was younger than Lorenzo, perhaps 40, with a jagged nose and a cheap tuxedo. It was Declan O'Connor, the head of the Irish mob, the man her father had originally owed money to. "Lorenzo!" Declan boomed, his voice too loud. "I heard the rumors, but I didn't believe them. You really did rob the cradle." He turned his leering gaze to Sienna. "Hello, darling. Does your daddy know you're out this late? Or is this your daddy?" The circle of socialites around them went quiet. It was a direct insult, a challenge to Lorenzo's masculinity. Lorenzo's jaw tightened, his hand flexing on his cane. Sienna stepped forward, blocking Declan's view of her husband. She looked him up and down with the critical eye of an art restorer examining a cheap forgery. "Mr. O'Connor, isn't it?" Sienna asked, her voice crystal clear. "That's right, sweetheart. I recognize you," Sienna said, smiling sweetly. "My professors use your business model as a case study in declining empires. They say you spend so much time chasing petty insults that you missed the fact that the Italians bought the harbor out from under you 3 months ago." Declan's smile vanished. The crowd gasped. It was true, and it was confidential information Sienna had read in Lorenzo's files. "Watch your mouth, girl," Declan snarled. "And as for the age difference," Sienna continued, stepping closer, her voice dropping to a lethal whisper that only the circle could hear. "I prefer a man who has already built his kingdom, Mr. O'Connor. It's much more satisfying than watching a boy like you play in the sandbox with borrowed shovels." Declan turned purple. He opened his mouth to speak, but saw the look in Lorenzo's eyes, a look of pure, unadulterated pride, and closed it. He spun on his heel and stormed off. Lorenzo placed a hand on the small of Sienna's back. The heat of his palm burned through the velvet. "Magnificent," he whispered in her ear, his voice rough. "Absolutely magnificent." "I learn from the best," Sienna replied, her heart racing. Lorenzo looked at her, and for the first time, the wall between them crumbled. He wasn't looking at an asset. He was looking at a partner. "Let's go home," Lorenzo said, his voice dark with promise. "The symphony is boring, and my wife is far more interesting." Sienna just humiliated a mob boss to defend her husband. If you love a strong female lead, smash that like button right now. Next up, the attack that changes everything. Lorenzo had to go to New York. The 5 families were meeting, a summit that required the presence of the king to prevent a war. He didn't want to go. Sienna could see the tension in his jaw as he packed, but duty was the only master Lorenzo Valenti bowed to. "Elias stays," Lorenzo ordered, adjusting his cufflinks in the mirror. "And 4 additional guards. You do not leave the penthouse. I'll be fine, Sienna said, straightening his tie. It was a domestic gesture that had become habit over the last 2 months. Go. Remind them who runs the East Coast. Lorenzo caught her hand, kissing her knuckles. I will be back in 24 hours. He left at dawn. By midnight, the power died. Sienna was in the kitchen with Maria, the housekeeper, baking biscotti, a distraction from the empty bed. The lights didn't flicker. They just cut out, plunging the penthouse into absolute darkness. Stay down, Sienna whispered, grabbing Maria's arm. Her training kicked in instantly. Power cut means breach. The emergency lights bathed the hallway in an eerie red glow. Gunfire erupted from the elevator lobby, loud, thundering cracks that shook the walls. Elias was earning his paycheck. The panic room, Sienna commanded, guiding the terrified older woman toward the hidden panel in the library. They were halfway down the hall when the service door, the one supposed to be impenetrable, blew inward with a deafening crash. 2 men in tactical gear spilled into the corridor, stepping over the body of a guard. They weren't Valenti men. They wore green armbands. O'Connor's crew. Get the girl, one shouted. Sienna shoved Maria into the laundry chute closet and slammed it shut. Stay quiet. She turned just as the first attacker reached her. He was big, smelling of stale tobacco and confidence. He reached for her hair, expecting a screaming victim. He found a soldier. Sienna dropped her weight, just as Elias had drilled into her until she puked. She drove her elbow into the man's solar plexus, knocking the wind out of him. As he doubled over, she didn't retreat. She stepped in. She grabbed his wrist, twisted his arm behind his back with a sickening pop, and drove her knee into his face. He went down. The second man raised his gun, but hesitation cost him. He hadn't expected the girl to fight. That split second gave Sienna time to grab the heavy bronze sculpture from the hall table, a bust of a Roman emperor. She swung it with both hands. The impact against the man's temple sounded like a melon cracking. He crumbled. Sienna stood in the red-lit hallway, chest heaving, her silk robe torn, the heavy bronze statue in her hand. Silence fell. Elias and the remaining guards rushed in from the lobby, weapons raised, ready to save her. They stopped. They stared at the unconscious hitmen and the young woman standing over them, eyes wide but dry. Secure the perimeter, Sienna ordered, her voice shaking only slightly. And get Maria out of the closet. Lorenzo returned 3 hours later. He had taken a private jet the moment the alarm tripped, flying through a storm to get back to Boston. He stormed into the penthouse like a hurricane, his suit jacket gone, his shirt unbuttoned, a gun in his hand. He looked wild, a side of Lorenzo Valenti the world rarely saw. Where is she? He roared at Elias. Master Suite, sir. She's unharmed. Lorenzo kicked the bedroom door open. Sienna was sitting on the edge of the bed, a medic bandaging a shallow cut on her forearm. When she looked up and saw him, the mask of bravery she'd been wearing finally cracked. Lorenzo, she breathed. He crossed the room in 2 strides, pulling the medic away and hauling Sienna into his arms. He buried his face in her neck, inhaling sharply. He was shaking. The ruthless Don, the man who ordered executions without blinking, was shaking. I thought I lost you, he rasped against her skin. I thought I was too late. I fought, Sienna whispered, gripping his shirt. I did what you said. I didn't hide. Lorenzo pulled back, his hands framing her face, his thumbs wiping away a smudge of blood on her cheek, blood that wasn't hers. You defended my home, he said, looking at her with a reverence that bordered on worship. You saved my staff. You are not just my wife, Sienna. You are my equal. The adrenaline that had been sustaining Sienna crashed, replaced by a sudden, overwhelming need. She realized in that moment that she didn't want to be safe. She wanted him. She wanted the man who would burn the world down to find her. Make me forget, she whispered, pulling him down to her. Make me forget the fear. Lorenzo didn't hesitate. He kissed her not with the gentle patience of the last few months, but with a starving, possessive hunger. I will give you everything. he growled against her lips. "Tonight, you are not a student. You are not a debt. You are mine." He lifted her effortlessly, carrying her to the center of the bed. The barriers of age, contract, and propriety shattered. There was no more waiting. When he finally claimed her, it wasn't an act of taking. It was an act of absolute devotion. Sienna met him matching his intensity, scratching her nails down his back, anchoring him to her. In the darkness of the room, amidst the wreckage of the attack, they forged a bond that no contract could ever dictate. Sienna fell asleep wrapped in his arms, the scent of sandalwood and gunpowder surrounding her, knowing she would never be a victim again. They finally crossed the line. If you've been waiting for this moment since Chapter 1, comment fire below. 2 months after the attack, the O'Connor syndicate no longer existed. Lorenzo had dismantled them systematically. Businesses burned, accounts frozen, leaders vanishing in the night. It was a scorched earth campaign that terrified Boston. But inside the penthouse, the atmosphere was different. It was quiet, peaceful. Sienna was restoring a 17th century oil painting in the spare room she had converted into a studio. The smell of turpentine made her stomach roll. She frowned, putting down her brush. She had been feeling off for a week, tired, nauseous, emotional. She looked at the calendar on the wall. Her breath hitched. She took the test in the master bathroom, staring at the little plastic stick for 10 minutes. 2 pink lines. When Lorenzo came home that evening, Sienna was waiting in the living room. She held a glass of sparkling water instead of her usual wine. "How was the Port Authority meeting?" she asked. "Tedious," Lorenzo said, kissing her forehead. "They want higher bribes. I told them to be grateful I allow them to operate." He sat down, looking at her. He knew her moods better than anyone now. "What is it, Kara? You are quiet." Sienna stood up and walked over to him. She took his hand, the hand that had signed her father's debt away, the hand that had held a gun to protect her, and placed it on her flat stomach. "We have a problem," she said softly. Lorenzo frowned, confused. "What problem? Is it your father? Did he contact you?" "No." Sienna smiled, tears pricking her eyes. "The problem is that we are going to need a nursery, and I refuse to paint it pink." Lorenzo went completely still. His hand flexed against her stomach. He looked up at her, his gray eyes wide, stripping away the layers of the Mafia Don until only a man remained. "You are." His voice failed him. "Yes," Sienna whispered. Lorenzo stood up slowly. He didn't speak. He pulled her into a hug so tight she squeaked, burying his face in her hair. Sienna felt his shoulders shaking. He was weeping, silent, shuddering tears of a man who thought his legacy had died decades ago. "A son," he whispered into her hair. "Or a daughter. It doesn't matter. They will own this city. They will never know hunger. They will never know fear." The next day, Lorenzo made a call to his lawyers. He began the process of selling the shipping operations, the illegal arms, the smuggling routes. He liquidated the dark assets. "Why?" his consigliere asked, bewildered. "We are making record profits. I am not building a criminal empire anymore," Lorenzo answered, looking at the ultrasound photo on his desk. "I am building a fortress for my family, and I don't want the FBI knocking on the door when my child is taking their first steps." Sienna had not just tamed the wolf. She had given him a reason to become a shepherd. 5 years later, the Florence sun was warm against the stone walls of the Museo Valenti. Sienna adjusted the frame of a Renaissance masterpiece, stepping back to admire the restoration work. She was 27 now, radiating a confidence that turned heads in every room she entered. She wasn't just the director of the museum. She was a respected figure in the European art world. Mama, a 4-year-old boy with messy black hair and gray eyes, barreled into the room, dodging a security guard. "Matteo." Sienna laughed, catching him before he crashed into a pedestal. "Careful. These statues are older than Nona." "Papa is here," Matteo shouted. Lorenzo walked in from the terrace. At 69, his hair was completely white, but his posture was as straight as ever. He wore a linen suit, looking every inch the retired statesman. He didn't look dangerous to the tourists, but Sienna saw the way he scanned the exits, the way the security team moved around him like satellites. He walked over to them, scooping Matteo up with one arm and kissing Sienna on the lips with the other. "The board meeting is finished," Lorenzo said. "We are officially acquiring the Da Vinci sketch. You threatened them, didn't you?" Sienna teased. "I made them an offer they couldn't refuse." Lorenzo winked. They walked out onto the balcony overlooking the Duomo. Sienna leaned against the railing, looking at her life. It was a masterpiece she had restored from the wreckage of a gambling debt. She thought about the terrified girl in the gallery in Boston, the girl who thought her life was over. She looked at Lorenzo, the monster she had feared, the husband she had learned to respect, the father she adored. "Do you ever think about it?" Lorenzo asked, sensing her thoughts. "How we started." "Every day," Sienna admitted. "I hated you." "I know," Lorenzo said, resting his hand over hers. "And now?" Sienna turned to him. The love she felt wasn't the sweet, innocent love of a fairy tale. It was heavy, complex, and forged in fire. It was a love built on survival. "Now," Sienna said, "I think it was the best deal I ever made." Lorenzo smiled, a genuine, warm smile that belonged only to her. "Come," he said, guiding her toward the sunset. "Dinner is waiting, and Matteo wants to hear the story about how Mommy fought the bad men." "Again?" Sienna laughed. "Legends are meant to be retold, Queen Sienna. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, please subscribe and turn on notifications. I release new dark romance stories every week. And tell me in the comments, do you think Lorenzo redeemed himself? Or is a villain always a villain? I read every comment.